Hello and welcome to Tap That MTG, the show where we tell you everything we know about Magic the Gathering that's probably wrong, but fun to talk about. Today we are bringing you yet another pre-con deep dive into the adventures in the Forgotten Realms, commander decks that are coming out shortly. We are super excited about them, and in this video we're going to just break it down for you, talk about all the cards that are in this deck, how we feel this deck is supposed to be played, give you some tips on maybe playing some of the cards wisely, as well as seeing how this deck stacks up to some of our formulas and things like that when we break it down. So Shauna, why don't you tell us a little bit about this commander and what this deck is supposed to do?
Okay, so this is the Planar Portal deck. So this deck is, the commander is Prosper Tomebound, a 1/4 for 2, a black and a red tiefling warlock with death touch. So he's just going to sit there and kind of be all grumpy. Mystic Arcanum, at the beginning of your end step, exile the top card of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. And then you've got Pact Boon. Is it Boon? Boon, where whenever you play a card from exile, you get to create a treasure token. So the gist of this deck, and Leslie and I had to get our heads around it, is that you're going to be playing cards from either your exile or the other player's exile. So you're going to need lots of treasure tokens because you're going to want to do lots of stuff. So the more treasure you can make, the more mana you can have there that you can use to cast all these crazy spells, which are then going to make you more treasures to cast more spells. It's just the idea of this deck is to just steal everyone's stuff and go crazy with stuff that's not even playing from your hand. So it's kind of like you've got all these hands everywhere. You've got the cards from your other players. You've got your extra cards. You've got your hand. It's going to be fun and interesting.
So if this is your first time ever buying a commander deck and playing commander or playing Magic, you probably don't want to pick this as your very first one. Although if you can master remembering all the triggers that happen, so there will be lots of triggers. Take your time, look at all your cards. Hopefully you're in a play group that is patient and can help you with that as well. But once you've played it a couple times, you'll kind of get the hang of it and know what the deck is supposed to do. So I think so.
I think it'll be really fun.
I think so too.
It's certainly
you're really excited
to play. You'll want to play this in person, not online, because it's going to be really hard to play each other's cards.
Steely stuff. But you're really excited about this deck too, right? This is right on what you like to do. So when we look at the card or the deck kind of in a more retrospective way, we can see that the mana curve, if we break down our mana curve, there's actually, it's kind of a weird mana curve. There's no curve to it. It's all just kind of like all over the place. So we have 4 at 1 mana cost, 17 at 2 mana cost, 11 at 3, 12 at 4, 6 at 5, and 11 at 6 and up. So all over the place. But some of these are perhaps going to be for free. Hopefully you have some enough mana to play them, and really, because you don't know what your opponents are going to have in exile, your mana curve is going to be dependent on that as well. So I'm not sure that looking at the mana curve helps us much here, but if we look at our color breakdown, we have 18 black, 22 red, and 12 colorless, and then 9 multicolored. This is a 2-color deck rather than a 3-color deck like some of the other ones, which will make it easier to play some of those spells because you don't have to worry about not having the mana that you need or the color you need. Then when we move to the card types, you can see that we have 21 creatures and 21 instants and sorceries. So this is a very high instant and sorcery type deck. We have 5 enchantments and 14 artifacts. So that's really interesting. It's kind of very balanced between creatures and instants and sorceries. So I think it'll be a really interesting deck to break down. But before we can tell you about our comparison, we have to tell you about our formula. So Shauna, what is this crazy formula that we're talking about?
So we like to use this commander deck building formula just to keep our decks balanced and stuff. And it seems like Wizards kind of follows the same generally formula for their precons that they make. So basically you've got your commander, of course, and then you have 15 ramp cards. So cards that are going to get you mana or generate mana for you. 15 removal cards, because we always say removal. You need to get rid of their stuff, either targeted or board wipe type things. Then we've got 13 card draw, because you got to keep your hand filled, especially in Commander. And then there are the high impact cards, so about 12 of those. So those are the cards that are going to win you the game or just like run over, to make huge swings in the game anyways. And then we've got about 10 of the other cards that support your win condition, alternate win conditions, different things like that you've got a little bit of flexibility in there. And then generally about 34 lands is what we like to go with in our commander deck. So that's how we break that down. So we're going to evaluate this deck based on that formula. So Leslie, what are we starting with?
We're going to start with ramp and mana generators. So as Shauna explained, our formula says that we should probably have around 15 kind of mana rocks or mana generators. This deck has 11, which isn't too bad. You're very close to that 15. Our first one is Arcane Signet, which has become a commander staple. It's 2 mana cost, little rock that you can tap and add for any color of your commander's identity, which comes in useful for fixing.
Mm-hmm. Then we have Commander Sphere, which is the 3 mana artifact that taps to add mana of any color in your commander's color identity, as well as you can sacrifice it later on to draw a card. So that's really nice to have.
And Fellware Stone, add 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce. So just kind of capitalizing on the colors that are around the table if you need to. But I'll just say a little caveat, most of the spells that you're going to cast from exile are going to be cast for any color. So you don't have to worry about having the right color if you're casting your opponent's spells.
Then Mind Stone, which is another commander staple at 2. It's for colorless mana, though, and you can pay 1 and tap it later on and sacrifice it to draw a card as well. So that's really handy.
And Orazca Relic. I haven't seen this one in a while, but I do like my Ixalan and Rivals of Ixalan cards. It's a 3 mana cost artifact that has Ascend, which I'll explain in a second, but it taps for colorless. And then you can tap it and sacrifice it and gain 3 life and draw a card. Activate this ability only if you have City's Blessing. So this card in and of itself will give you City's Blessing. If you have 10 or more permanents, then you get the City's Blessing. Once you have the City's Blessing, you never lose it throughout the rest of the game. It's just a little token that shows up on your battlefield, but you have to have a card that gives it to you with Ascend. So this gives you Ascend.
Then the Rakdos Signet, those are very, very common, but useful. So it's a 2 mana cost artifact that you pay 1 and tap it to do both black and red mana. So very handy.
And I was having a conversation about this next card with some people on stream the other day. Soul Ring, for 1, it taps for 2. There's actually a few people that just because Soul Ring ramps you up so fast that have actually taken, they think it's a little bit, it's in every commander deck it seems, but taking it out makes it so that your deck isn't quite as powerful. So I don't know, who knew that this was such a powerful card or in the world of commander. Interesting. Yeah.
The talisman for this deck is really, really nice as well. Talisman of Indulgence. In this case, for 2, you can tap it to add a colorless mana, or you can add black or red to your mana pool, but it deals a damage to you. So that'll come in a pinch for you as well.
You can take a damage. Unstable Obelisk for 3. Again, another artifact that just taps for colorless, but it has this additional ability that you can pay 7 and sacrifice it to destroy target permanent. So our other one drew you a card as an extra. This one destroys a target permanent, which comes in super handy since it's only a 3 mana cost. You can get it out there as a little insurance policy.
Yeah, exactly. Then we have a new card from the Forgotten Realms that fits right in with the whole Dungeons and Dragons theme. It's also very fun to have in Commander, especially for 2. It's Bucknard's Everfull Purse. And we got quite the chuckle over that name. But anyway,
Yeah.
it's a you pay 1 and tap it and roll a d4 and create a number of treasure tokens equal to the number or equal to the result that you get. And then the player to your right gets to try that as well for them. So it's kind of a silly little thing. It's very fun.
Yeah, anything that kind of travels around the table and helps everyone out is kind of
Yeah.
fun. Ebony Fly for 2 enters the battlefield tapped. Next turn, you can tap it for mana, or you can pay 4 and roll a d6, and until the end of turn, you can have it become an XX insect artifact creature token with flying, where X is the result. So if you happen to roll a 6, you get a 6/6 with flying until the end of turn, and then it doesn't stay a creature, it just becomes an artifact. So unless they have instant removal for creatures, it can just kind of keep coming back, which is really kind of cool.
Yeah, and it gives another one of your creatures.
Yeah, flying.
Flying. A handy little fly.
Gotta love it.
Then we're into the removal section. So the formula calls for 15. The deck has kind of 20 that we were looking at because a lot of it is the removal is stealing their stuff. So yeah, it's interesting.
It's kind of on theme and it's yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, so it's removal, but kind of not really because you get to have it instead.
Yeah. This deck revolves around removal.
It's crazy. So the Chittering Witch for 3 and a black, it's a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, you create a number of 1/1 black rat creature tokens equal to the number of opponents you have. So it's definitely a card made for Commander. And you can pay 1 and a black and sacrifice a creature, and another target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. So you can either use those rats or other creatures that you steal from someone. And yeah, the more you can pay into it, the more damage you're going to be able to do.
Consuming Vapors does exactly what you would hope it would do, is removal for 3 and a black. It's a sorcery. Target player sacrifices a creature, and then you gain life equal to that creature's toughness. This card has rebound, which is great. So if you cast it from your hand, you get to exile it as it resolves. Remember, our commander wants to play things from exile, and then at the beginning of your next upkeep, you may cast this card from exile without paying its mana cost. So not only do you get it free from exile at the beginning of your next upkeep, it triggers that extra little treasure for your commander. So it's good.
So this one, Hex, we were both kind of like, what? For 4 and 2 black, it's a sorcery that says destroy 6 target creatures. For 6. We were a little bit shocked at that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's for when killing 5 just isn't enough.
Like what? What the heck? Okay.
Oh, Disrupt Decorum for 2 and 2 red is a sorcery. I love these ones that goad things. So goad all creatures you don't control. We love to call this one removal because ultimately you're making people either you're going to remove players by people not blocking, or you're going to remove you'll remove their creatures because they have to block with them. So basically pits the table against everybody except for you, which is fantastic.
Yeah. Then there's this strange card called This, I think, for 3 and 4 black. So it seems like, oh my gosh, how can I ever play this? But it's a sorcery that says destroy target creature. Its controller loses life equal to its power plus its toughness. So that could be dangerous. But it has to spend 5. So you pay 1 in the black. And so rather than casting the card from your hand, you can pay the 1 in the black and exile it with 5 time counters on it. And at the beginning of your upkeep, remove one of those time counters. When the last is removed, you can cast it without paying its mana cost. So that's a little scary threat for someone to have out there. Plus, it's in exile, so it counts towards that whole thing that you're doing with your commander. Yeah, people are going to be very scared of this card.
Yeah, well, and if you play it early game and there's nothing out, people are going to be reluctant to play those good cards that you can kill. So which slows them down. That is a good strategy, right? They're not able to do that until this resolves. Or you've just kind of put it out after someone's got something big and now they got 5 turns to kill you, or you're gonna, you know, so Vandal Blast, for one, is just a destroy target artifact you don't control. It does have Overload for 4 and a red. I love that there's all these extra abilities that we get to talk about. You may cast the spell for its Overload cost. If you do, you change its text by replacing all instances of target with each. So instead of, so if you decide you're gonna like play it for 5, ultimately you're going to destroy all target artifacts you don't control. So
All of them.
yeah.
Chaos Warp for 2 and a red. It's a little instant that says the owner of target permanent shuffles it into their library, then reveals the top card of their library. If it's a permanent card, they put it onto the battlefield. So it's one of those things. It's very chaotic. You can do it to them. You can do it to yourself if you want, but it's the idea is to get rid of something big of theirs that you just can't deal with. It's a great way to deal with it and hopefully not give them something worse.
Yeah. Bedevil, destroy target artifact, creature, or planeswalker. Lots of choice there. And it's just a nice little 3 mana cost instant.
Bituminous.
You get all the hard ones today to pronounce.
For 3, a black and a red, it's an instant that has Cascade. So when you cast this spell, you get to exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card that costs less, which is fairly easy to do with that one. You may cast it without paying its mana cost. Put the exiled cards in the bottom in a random order. So it deals 4 damage to a target creature. So it's a great way to get an extra card and make your commander thing fire off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Cascade is great in this deck, so it's good to see that in here. Rakdos Charm for a black and a red is an instant that you get to choose one, so it has options. Exile all cards from target player's graveyard. So if they're playing Dungeons of Death, that's a good thing to use against them. Destroy target artifact. So if they're playing the Aura one, then that's a good one to play. Or each creature deals 1 damage to its controller, which if they're going wide, like Shauna always does, that's a good one to play against her. So there's options.
My own creatures kill me. Terminate for a black and a red. Destroy target creature. It can't be regenerated. All suns must set. I think that is that the Sun Titan there?
Yeah, maybe. Shiny Impetus. I love these impetuses. I said this in one of our other videos, but again, it has this goad thing on it. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2, which is great for them. It also is goaded, so it can't attack you. Most people don't mind if you put an impetus on their creature because ultimately it doesn't matter. They have other people that they can attack. Yeah. I will say the caveat, it's that other players or a player other than you, if able. So once there's just the 2 of you, then they can attack you even if it's goaded. So
yeah. The treasures are nice to have.
Yes.
This one, Dance Macabre, for 3 and 2 black. It's a sorcery that each player sacrifices a non-token creature. Then you roll the d20 and add the toughness of the creature you sacrifice this way. So roll a 10, you're going to add a 4 toughness or something like that. And then for 1 to 14, you get to return a creature card put into the graveyard this way to the battlefield under your control. So it could be theirs. Return up to 2 creature cards put into graveyards this way to the battlefield under your control. So yeah, that's kind of a crazy way to steal somebody's stuff.
Well, and you might just get the creature back that you just put in the graveyard too. So you can sacrifice something because you're going to add the toughness of your creature. So at the very least, you'll get your creature back that you sacrificed. So you can sacrifice whatever the heck you want, your highest power thing. And if you're lucky, then you also get something else. So it's great.
Awesome.
Yeah, Grim Hireling for 3 and a black is a tiefling rogue that's 3/2. And when one or more creatures you control deals combat damage to a player, you get to create 2 treasure tokens. Then it also has the ability you can play a black and sacrifice X treasures. Target creature gets -X until the end of turn, only as a sorcery. So nice little removal that takes advantage of all those treasures that you're going to have on hand. If you're not using them for mana, you can then use them for something else. So
We were talking about this whenever one or more phrase
mm-hmm.
yesterday.
Yeah.
So does that mean every creature I get to create 2 treasure tokens, or just that happens once?
Yeah, no, if it said whenever a creature you control deals combat damage, then you get 2 treasure tokens, then it would be for each creature. But if it's whenever one or more, that means it doesn't matter how many, you still only get 2 treasure tokens. So in this case, doesn't matter how many, just 2.
Good clarification there.
Mm-hmm.
Hellish Rebuke for 2 and a black. It's an instant.
Great
It's hellish.
spell.
Until the end of turn, permanent your opponent's control gain. When this permanent deals damage to the player who cast Hellish Rebuke, sacrifice this permanent and you lose 2 life. So you're going to use this. They're swinging a whole bunch of stuff at you and you're like, damn you. You're going to make them sacrifice all those creatures that smack you in the face.
It's great. It's like Settle the Wreckage.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
But worse. Because they lose
worse.
Stuff.
And only for 3. So like, how come black gets all the good stuff? Fiend Lash for 1 and a red. Look at that whip sword thingy equipment.
Yeah.
Equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has reach. And whenever equipped creature is dealt damage, it deals damage equal to its power to target player or planeswalker. So they will be reluctant to swing with all their little dudes if it means that you have something big that's just going to crack back at them.
Crack that whip. Reckless Endeavor for 5 and 2 red. It's a sorcery. You get to roll 2 d12s and choose 1 result. It deals damage equal to that result to each creature.
Ugh.
Then create a number of treasure tokens equal to the other result. So that could be interesting.
It's awesome. I love it. I love it.
Know.
This is the very chaotic deck. Very Rakdos. Hurl Through Hell for 2 and a black and a red is an instant. You get to exile target creature until the end of your turn. You may cast that card and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast that spell. So yeah, you can just exile their creature and cast it for yourself.
Nasty. You find some prisoners, very Dungeons and Dragon-ish, choose your own adventure-ish. For 1 and a red, it's an instant that you choose 1. Break their chains, so you destroy a target artifact. Or you can interrogate them. Exile the top 3 cards of target opponent's library. Choose one of them until the end of your next turn. You may play that card, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast it. Steely Steel.
Yeah. I would probably use the second one more than, unless you absolutely need to destroy an artifact, which there are some, the second one works best for this deck. So for land, we're not going to talk a lot about land, and we'll talk about that a little bit in the land section, but we felt that this one would be a good one to put in the removal section because it's a land that actually also has removal. So it'll tap for colorless, but you can pay 5 and exile it to roll a d10 and then put target artifact, creature, or planeswalker in its owner's library just beneath the top X cards of their library, where X is the results. And you can activate this only as a sorcery. But nice way to just say, hey, you're going to potentially, if I roll a 10, have to wait 10 turns before you get this card back, which is a lot of turns in a commander game. Even if you rolled 5 as the typical kind of average roll, you're still going to have 5 turns of respite from whatever that creature is.
Yeah. So then we get into the card draw tutor section of this deck. And so you notice that we had a lot of removal and stuff, but that removal is, a lot of it was you getting cards. So it's kind of similar to card draw in that removal section. So the formula calls for 13, but this deck has only about 5 specifically drawing type cards, but stealing stuff from other people to me was kind of like drawing cards as well. So I don't know. We'll see how that goes. So Light Up the Stage is the first one for 2 and a red. It has Spectacle of 1. So Spectacle means that if you do damage to someone's face, you get to use the Spectacle cost if they've lost life. And you get to exile the top 2 cards of your library, and until end of your next turn, you may play those cards. So again, with the whole commander, you're going to have a couple cards that you can play, which is really good.
And then we have Throes of Chaos for 3 and a red. And this card is very interesting because it just has Cascade on it instead of Cascade with another ability or something like that. So you're going to cast it and then you're going to cast something for free that's 3 or less. You're just going to exile cards. The reason this one is really good in this deck is because you want to cast things from exile. So you're going to be exiling these cards to cascade it. And it also has Retrace, which allows you to kind of play it from your graveyard or cast it from your graveyard. And you're going to discard a land in order to do that. But with all the treasures that you'll have, hopefully have, you can easily discard a land into your graveyard in order to cast this. So Cascade, just really good in this deck.
Yeah. Then Commune with Lava for X and 2 red. This one is an instant that's perfect for this deck as well because it specifically just exile the top X cards of your library until end of your next turn. You may play those cards. So you've got lots of time to play all these other cards. You do have to pay for them, but you're going to be doing a lot of stuff with this card.
Mm-hmm. Bag of Devouring for 1 black is an artifact. So this is cool because when you sacrifice another non-token artifact or creature, you get to exile it. And there are things that require you to sacrifice creatures or permanents. So this allows you to pay 2 and sacrifice another artifact or creature to draw a card. So it's that sack outlet in and of itself. And then you can also sacrifice Bag of Devouring, roll a d10, and turn up to X cards from among those exiled with Bag of Devouring to their owner's hand, where X is the results. So you won't be casting them from exile, you'll be returning them to their hand, but it allows you to save those things that are being sacrificed, which is great.
Chaos Channeler for 2 and 2 red. It's a 4/3 human shaman that has Wild Magic Surge. Whenever it attacks, you roll a d20. 1 to 9, you get to exile the top card of your library, and you may play it this turn. 10 to 19, you get to exile the top 2 cards of your library, and you may play them this turn. And if you get 20, you get to exile the top 3 cards of your library, and you may play them this turn. So that could be fun.
Mm-hmm. I think anybody that plays a sorcerer, so where this is D&D, I'm going to like do a little aside D&D here. I think anyone that plays a wild magic sorcerer always wants their DM to say, roll a d20 so you can see what happens with your wild magic. It's like that thing. I know anytime I played, I'm like, do you want me to roll? Do you want me to roll? Do I get a roll? So let us know in the comments if you have people at your table that are constantly asking to roll on wild magic as well. So our next section is our high impact cards. These are cards that are going to win you the game or turn it in your favor in some way, shape, or form, as well as work really well with your commander. Our formula says you should have about 12 of those. This deck has about 10, which is right on par. The first one is Atali, Primal Storm. I love Atali. It's a nice little elder dinosaur for 6. It's a 6/6. But when it attacks, you get to exile the top card of each player's library, then cast any number of those spells from among those cards without paying their mana cost. So if you have a full table of commander, you're getting potentially 4 or 5 things, or 3 to 4 things for free. Oh no, it's yours too. So yeah, you're getting something off your
Yours.
deck for free, and they're all coming out of exile for free. So you're going to trigger your commander with that as well if you have it out on the battlefield. So really great card for this deck.
Yeah. Is it Chemister for 2 in a red, a 1/3 little goblin wizard with haste that says, so you can do this right away, you can pay red and tap it and exile a target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard. So you're going to have a plan for this, and then you could pay 1 in a red and tap it and sacrifice it and cast any number of cards exiled with Is It Chemister without paying their mana costs.
Free, free, free.
So crazy.
Tectonic Giant for 2 and 2 red is a 3/4 elemental giant. When it attacks or becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent or a spell an opponent controls, you get to choose one. It either does 3 damage to each opponent, or you get to exile the top 2 cards of your library and choose one of them until the end of your next turn. You may play that card. So you're going to have this ongoing little, here's my cards in exile that I can play until my next turn. We were talking about triggers and knowing things. One thing that will really help you when you're playing this deck, if you're very new to Magic or very new to all these triggers, is just place that card underneath that, or place the card that's being exiled underneath that creature or that thing that's exiling it. That way you know on your upkeep you need to check and see, do I need to get rid of any of these things? They are going to be kind of in different places all over your board, but then they don't get mixed up as far as these ones I can cast forever and ever, or these ones are going to go away at the end of the next turn and that type of stuff. So just a little tip there.
Yeah, that's a good one. Apex of Power. So I've played this card once before. It is so awesome. For 7 and 3 red. So hopefully you've got lots of treasures you're going to invest into this thing. But when you get to play it, it is so awesome. So it's a sorcery that says exile the top 7 cards of your library. Until end of turn, you may cast spells from among them. If the spell was cast from your hand, add 10 mana of any one color. So it pays for itself and then some to do some crazy shenanigans.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Basically just like it's so awesome. It's basically for a free spell that you're investing 10 mana into the top 7 cards of your library. It's pretty cool.
Very cool.
Ignite the Future, which you might want to do after you've done this Apex of Power. 3 and a red is a sorcery. Exile the top 3 cards of your library until your next turn. You may play those cards. If this spell was cast from your graveyard, you may play cards this way without paying their mana cost. So it has flashback. The first time you play it, you just get those 3 cards, but the second time you play it, it's going to cost you 8. And that's why you get the cards for free.
Yeah. So play that. Yeah. Oh my gosh. That could be bad for the other opponents. My goodness.
Free, free, free.
Lorcan, the Warlock Collector for 5 and 2 black, a big 6/6 flying devil. Whenever a creature card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, you may pay life equal to its mana value. What's a little bit of life? If you do, you get to put it on the battlefield under your control. It's a warlock in addition to its other types. And if a warlock you control would die, you get to exile it instead. Mm-hmm. So you're going to use their stuff and then exile it when it dies.
Exactly. They can't. It doesn't go back to their graveyard for them to get back. It's great.
Yeah, it's just gone.
Yeah, exactly. Death Tyrant is another new one. No one wants to see one of these in a dark alley or a sewer system. For 4 and a black is a 4/6 with Menace. It has negative energy cone, which means whenever an attacking creature you control or blocking creature an opponent controls dies, you get to create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. And it has 5 and a black to return it from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So not just to your hand, it's going to go back to your graveyard. You're basically just going to keep being able to cast this from your graveyard and create zombies. So once you have it, it's there.
Yeah. It's crazy. Dream Pillager for 5 and 2 red. It's a 4/4 flying dragon. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, exile that many cards from the top of your library. Until end of turn, you may cast non-land cards exiled this way. Another great way to just get some more cards, because it's going to be 4 at least, right?
Yeah, exactly. And Marionette Master, another great high impact card for this deck. So 4 and 2 black. Why would you pay 6 for a 1/3, you say? Well, let us tell you. It has Fabricate 3. So what that means is when this creature enters the battlefield, you're going to put 3 1/1 counters on it. Or you can create 3 1/1 colorless server artifact tokens. But you're going to put the counters on it because whenever an artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to Marionette Master's power. So remember all those treasure tokens that you were creating? Well, whenever you sacrifice one, it hits the graveyard before it ceases to exist. So every time you use a treasure, for each of those treasures, when they hit the graveyard, you're going to do damage equal to Marionette Master's power to target opponent. So it's target opponent, right? Not all opponents. Yeah, target opponents. Yeah. So if you put those counters on there, now it's going to be a 4/6, and you're going to, every time you sacrifice a treasure, you're going to do 4 damage to someone. So potentially really high impact there. Don't create the servos, put the counters on them.
Yeah, that's game changing, that card right there.
Yeah.
Kara Zikar, the Eye Tyrant. It's a 5/5 beholder. These beholders are nasty.
Nasty.
A black and a red. It's whenever you attack a player, tap target creature that player controls and goad it. And then whenever an opponent attacks another one of your opponents, you and the attacking player each draw a card and lose 1 life.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Kind of
nice
removal.
Little card draw. It's a 5/5. It gets goaded.
Yeah.
All right, now we're moving on to the last section, which is other cards on theme or stuff that basically fills your deck up, other win conditions, basically the support for all the rest of the stuff that you have. The first one we have is a Fiend of Shadows for 5. It's a flyer that's 3/3, and when it deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles a card from his or her hand, and then you may play that card as long as it remains in exile. It's going to stay in exile. It doesn't just stay in exile until this leaves the battlefield. So that's one of those things that's just going to stay in a little pile that you can cast anytime you want. You can also sacrifice a human to regenerate Fiend of Shadows if someone tries to kill it. So handy.
Nice. Gaunty, Lord of Luxury. This was a very popular card in the Kaladesh set. For 2 and 2 black, it's a 2/3 with Death Touch. And when it enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of target's opponent's library. You exile one of them face down. So tuck it under Gaunty. And then put the rest on the bottom of that person's library in random order. And you may look at the card that you just exiled and cast it for as long as it remains exiled. And you may spend mana as though it were any color to cast that spell. Mm-hmm. Great way to steal something good from them.
Mm-hmm. I'll have to say too, like, even if you never cast any of these things, you're exiling them from their libraries. So you're removing them from their game as well, which is great. Ogre Slumlord for 3 and 2 black is a 3/3 Ogre Rogue that whenever another non-token creature dies, you get to create a 1/1 black rat creature token. Rats you control have Death Touch. So they're going to be more reluctant to swing at you or block your little rats if you decide to just go wide and attack them with an army of rats. Wasn't there another card that had to do with rats that we talked about just earlier too?
Yeah, I think so. Isn't the
it's okay. We don't have to go back, but yeah, there was another card.
The Chittering Witch, I think, has rats or something.
Exactly. So
Pontifa Blight for 4 and 2 black. It's a 2/7 zombie cleric that has Extort. So whenever you cast a spell, you can pay either white or black. And if you do, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life, or gain that much life. So each opponent loses a life and you gain that much life. So you're going to gain 3 life if you have 3 opponents, Leslie?
Whenever you cast a spell, you may sorry.
You do. Each opponent loses 1 life and you gain that much life.
Yeah, you would gain 3. Well,
Okay.
depending. You would gain however many life that they lost. So
Right.
if it was 3 opponents, yeah, we're just like thinking you have a table of 4.
Yeah. Other creatures you control have extort. So you can have lots of things going on with the whole extort thing.
Mm-hmm.
Draining life and gaining life.
Yeah.
So mean.
Dark Dweller Oracle for 1 and a red is a 2/2. You can pay 1 and sacrifice a creature and exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. So whenever it says you may play that card this turn, unless it says without paying its mana cost, you do have to pay for it, whatever that is. This one still reminds you still have to pay the cost, but you can play a land this way only if you have an available land play remaining. So even if it's a land, you can put it on the battlefield if you haven't played your land per turn, which is why it's a good idea you don't always have to, the first thing you do when you're a new player usually is, I'm going to play a land and then I'm going to do stuff. You can wait until the end of your turn to play your land in your second main phase, because stuff like this might happen and then you can take advantage of that land and just keep that one in your hand for discarding or whatever if you need to.
The Direfleet Daredevil for 1 and a red. It's a 2/1 with first strike. So 2/1 doesn't matter if it has first strike. When it enters the battlefield, exile target instant or sorcery card from a graveyard, an opponent's graveyard. You may cast that card this turn and you may spend mana or mana of any color to cast that spell. And if that card was put into a graveyard this turn, you exile it instead. Great way to steal their good instants and sorceries as well.
And Loyal Apprentice for 1 and a red is a little hasty dude for 2/1. It has Lieutenant, which means at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control your commander, then you get to create a 1/1 colorless softer artifact creature token with flying. The token gains haste until the end of turn, which will help some of the other cards that maybe if you sacrifice or that artifact hits the graveyard, something happens. So having a few more little things on the battlefield that you can either block with or sacrifice is great.
Just happens really quickly. That's awesome. Chaos Wand for it's an artifact for 3 and it is definitely chaos. So you can pay 4 and tap this wand, and target opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile an instant or sorcery card. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Then you put the exiled cards that weren't cast this way on the bottom of that library in a random order. So it completely messes with their plans, and you get to take something of theirs for free.
And if you cast it out of exile for free, you get a treasure. It's not only do you get it for free, you get a treasure out of it if you have your that's a ridiculous card for this deck. That should be in high impact. That's ridiculous. That's good support right there. Dead Man's Chest for 1 and a black is an enchantment order. Enchant a creature an opponent controls, and then when enchanted creature dies, you get to exile cards equal to its power from the top of its owner's library. You may cast a non-land card from among them for as long as it remains in exile, and you may spend mana as though they were mana of any type to cast those spells. So again, you're going to get a bunch of stuff in exile that you can cast and steal from their deck. So, who needs your own stuff in your own deck?
The Theater of Horrors is definitely a horror, especially in this deck, because for 1 and a black and a red, it's an enchantment that lets you, at the beginning of your upkeep, you exile the top card of your library. And then during your turn, if an opponent lost life this turn, which you're going to be draining them, you may play cards exiled with Theater of Horrors. And just to make sure that they lose life, you can pay 3 in a red and deal 1 damage to target opponent or planeswalker if you need to as well. So yeah, it feeds itself and you're going to be getting cards, extra cards. So it's basically an extra card draw every turn. It's nasty.
So this next card is so fun, and I think will be fun for the table as well as just not just you. So for 2 mana, which is super cheap for an enchantment, when Share the Spoils enters the battlefield or an opponent loses the game, so there's multiple times that this might happen. Each player is going to exile the top card of their library in this little pool for Share the Spoils. Then every turn a player has, so your partners or your opponents are going to have advantage of this as well. You can you that player may play land or use the land as though it was any color to cast anything from that pool or multiple things from that pool if they so choose. The caveat is they have to then exile something from the top of their library to put in the spoils. So you can take something out, but you're going to have to put something back in from the top
Yeah.
of your library. So it's risky, but there might be something really good in there. And I think this is going to be a really fun one to play around the table.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Wild Magic Sorcerer for 3 and a red. It's a 4/3 little orc shaman. And the first spell you cast from exile each turn has Cascade.
Crazy.
So in this deck, that is going to be insane.
Insane.
You get to do all this
Insane
extra
in the
stuff.
membrane.
It's just, oh my gosh, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So, some of these support cards are pretty good.
So just that alone is going to get you 2 treasures, right?
Yeah.
So, oh my God. Oh.
Fevered Suspicion for 6 and a black and a red is a sorcery, and each opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card. You may cast any number of the spells from among them, those non-land cards, without paying their mana cost. So it does the same thing as a tally does, but just once. It does. That's why they cost a lot. Like these, it costs 8, so it's worth it. It's not like you're just getting something for 2 mana. It also has rebound, so if you cast this spell from your hand, you exile it as it resolves, and at the beginning of your next upkeep, you may cast this card from exile without paying its mana cost. So basically, you're gonna play it one turn, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you're gonna play it again, and you get it for free. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Then the Warlock class is just a good supporting card for this deck, of course, because for black, it's an enchantment that just sits out there, and depending on what level it's at. So this is new to this set that's coming out. So at the beginning of your end step, if a creature died this turn, each opponent loses 1 life. So that's just going to sit there and always be the case as long as this card is out. But you can pay 1 and a black and add to that by moving it to level 2, where when it becomes level 2, you look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 of them in your hand and the rest in your graveyard. So that might be useful for you. Or you could pay 7 and level it up to level 3. And at the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses life equal to the life they lost this turn. So that would be really mean. They already lose 1 for sure when creatures die, and yeah, it could really add up in how much life they lose. It's just going to drain them away.
Yeah.
Kind of mean.
It's kind of great. It's kind of awesome. And as I said before, we're not going to talk a ton about the land. Our formula says that you should have 34. This deck has 38, so there is some room to play. However, you do want to make sure that you have enough to play those spells from exile if you're not getting tokens or treasures. So we always recommend, play with the deck a couple times first, see how it's working for you, see if it's giving you what you want before you start tweaking and taking things out of it, especially land. So it has a basic implement of land, and land can be tweaked in many different ways. Of course, it's one of the most expensive things in Magic is having a good land. So take a look at what you have, but a basic land base that just gets you the cards out is totally fine to play as is. So
totally.
Mm-hmm.
Then we're going to move into our tweaks for this deck. So we've got a few of them here that we think if you have them, some of them are expensive cards, some of them not so much. So it's just some ideas for you if you want to tweak this deck a little bit after you've played with it and want to make some changes to it. The first one is, of course, Revel in Riches for 4 and a black. It's an enchantment that sits out there, and whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, create a treasure token. So even if you don't want to do the win con that's on this, because at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 10 or more treasures, you just win the game, which is kind of mean. But even if you just want to use it to generate lots of treasure for you to play all sorts of crazy stuff, it's a great way to do it because you're killing creatures are dying everywhere, and you're able to get some extra treasures, which is really, really nice.
Yeah. It will, if you play this, it will put a target on your head immediately.
Yes,
Everyone will start trying to kill you.
definitely.
So, and you should
Definitely.
expect that. Tempting Contract for 4 is a lovely little artifact that came out with Commander Legends, I believe, or was it the last set? Anyways, at the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent may create a treasure token. However, for each of those opponents who does, you get to create a treasure token. So it's a little contract. It's like, hey, would you like to have a treasure? I'm giving them away for free. Oh, by the way, I get one as well. So potentially, if in a game of 4, or you might get 3 treasures per turn. Yeah, so we'll see how many people like you.
Yeah. I think Brass's Bounty is an auto include in this deck because for a 6 and a red, it is a sorcery that lets you, for each land you control, create a treasure token. So generally, you're going to have the 7 lands, or this could be one of those spells that you cast for free and get even more treasures. Who knows? It's something that is really going to help you out for sure in this deck.
And we talked a little bit about Cascade and how good it is in this deck. One of the things that's not included in this deck already is the Aurora Phoenix for 4 and 2 red. It's a 5/3 flyer, which is good in and of itself, but it also has Cascade. So when it comes in, again, it's 6 mana, so you're going to get something for 5 or less for free, which is awesome. And then whenever you cast a spell with Cascade, you get to return Aura Phoenix from your graveyard to your hand, and there was a couple of them in there, as well as the one card that gives everything Cascade, which would count for this as well. So you can just keep bringing it back and then keep cascading. So this, I think, would be a really good include as well.
Yeah, I think so too. And then a simple little cheap, inexpensive card, Gold Vein Pick for 2. It's a little artifact equipment that gives its equipped cost is only 1, and it gives equipped creature +1/+1. And whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player, you get to make a treasure. So stick it on a flyer, stick it on something unblockable or death touchy or something. And you're going to get some treasures with this guy.
Yeah, one of your little Death Touch rats. Make it into a 2/2 and get some treasures, right?
Yeah.
Hoarding Ogre is another option for treasures. Of course, you wouldn't just take a bunch of cards out and put a bunch of treasure stuff in. We're just giving you some options. But Hoarding Ogre is another option, and this is one of the new ones for 3 and a red. It's a 3/3, so you get a body out of it as well. When it attacks, you get to roll a d20. From 1 to 9, you create a treasure token. From 10 to 19, you create 2. And if you get a nat 20, you get to create 3 treasure tokens. So either way, when it attacks, you're going to get a treasure token, which is awesome. If you have Gold Vein Pick on it, like we just talked about, it's a 4/4 that when it does damage, you're going to create a treasure token with that as well. So he can do some work for you if you include him in.
For sure. Then we were thinking maybe get some more cards that have the whole exile theme. So Act on Impulse for 2 and a red. It's a little sorcery that says exile the top 3 cards of your library until end of turn. You may play cards exiled this way. So there's some triggers for your commander. Use that card for sure.
Yeah. And then Chandra Fire Artesian is actually a great card for this deck as well. For 2 and 2 red, you get a 4 loyalty planeswalker, and both of her abilities have to do with exiling. So you can +1 exile the top card of your library, and you may play that card this turn. And then -7, you get to exile the top 7 cards of your library, and you may play them this turn. And she has the other ability that either makes it hard for people to attack her, or just when you use her -7, whenever 1 or more loyalty counters are removed from her, she deals that much damage to target opponent or planeswalker. So she does some damage as well as takes advantage of all of the exiling stuff. So she's a I would say also kind of an auto include if you can find something
Yeah.
that you want
And
to take out.
I don't think that card is expensive either right now.
Yeah, she's a
So
nice budget one for you.
yeah, yeah. Flame Skull for 1 and 2 red. It's a 3/1 flyer that's new to the new set coming out that it can't block, but that's okay. It has rejuvenation. When it dies, you're going to exile it. And if you do, you exile the top card of your library. Until end of your next turn, you may play one of those cards.
Mhm.
So if you cast Flame Skull this way, you can't play the other card and vice versa. So it's, yeah, you just keep bringing it back over and over again, and the whole exile trigger happens, or you bring back something better. It's totally up to you. It's going to do some work for you, I think.
Yeah. We were also kind of thinking that if you find that you aren't able to get through because there's too many big beefy dudes, adding flying to the deck is always a good thing. And this flyer takes advantage of the exiling as well. So for 4 and 2 black, you get a 5/5 flyer mind leecher. Whenever this creature mutates, exile the top card of each player's library face down, and you may look at them and play those cards as long as they remain in the exile. So you're going to get them. It doesn't matter if mind leecher dies, you get to cast them as long as they're in exile. You only get that once because you're only going to mutate once, unless you bring it back, I guess, to your hand, and then you can mutate again. But it's nice to have a flyer anyway, to kind of get in for that damage when the game is stalled out. So
yeah. Then we have Furious Rise for 2 and a red. It's in a little enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, you get to exile the top card of your library. You may play that card until you exile another card with Furious Rise. So it's just going to sit there until you can use that card.
yeah.
Beautiful.
And Robber of the Rich is just a beautiful card in any format, in my opinion. For 1 in a red, it's a reach, it has haste, it's a 2/2, and when it attacks, if defending player has more cards in hand than you, which in a red-black deck they probably will, you get to exile the top card of their library, and then during any turn you attack with the rogue, you may cast that card. And you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color. So basically, you're just going to steal something, put it away in this little pile. Again, keep your piles separate, and then you can cast it. So,
and then last but not least, as far as some of the updates we were thinking of, this one's a little more expensive, but if you can put this in this deck, it's going to be crazy. Valki, God of Lies. On the one side, it's a legendary creature god. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent reveals their hand, so you get some information. And you get to exile, for each opponent, exile a creature card they revealed this way until Valki leaves the battlefield. And then you can pay X and choose a creature card that has been exiled with Valki, with converted mana cost X, and then Valki becomes a copy of that card. So it becomes whatever you've exiled from that person. It's pretty mean, pretty nasty. So that alone is going to help you. But on the other side, the Tibalt Cosmic Imposter for 5, a black and a red. When it enters the battlefield, you get an emblem right away that says you may play cards exiled with Tibalt, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color. So that side of this card is just insane for this deck. Its +2 is exile the top card of each player's library, including your own. -3, exile target artifact or creature. So it's removal on the stick here. Or you can -8, exile all cards from all graveyards and add red. 3 red. So yeah, that's going to be stupid in this
so good
deck.
for this deck. So good for this deck.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So nuts.
So that's really it for this time. As we talked, there's lots of other cards out there that we could possibly add to this deck. Of course, you don't want to totally redo the whole deck, so you're going to find those gems that you think might just make it a little bit better, or depending on the power level you want to go to, you can add Tibalt and make it really a lot better. So it's really up to you, and we'd love to hear from you what you think. We hope that you have a great time playing this deck. We certainly hope to ourselves as well. Let us know how you tweak the deck. Also, if you like what you saw, please consider subscribing or liking the video. You can also find us live on Twitch 3 times a week. Reach out to us on Twitter. We love to talk to you there as well. And until next time,
tap those magic cards and have fun doing it. Thank you.
bye, guys.